Official reports show the economy has taken a major hit thanks to the government-mandated COVID-19 lockdowns. According to the advance estimate released by the Bureau of Economic Analysis, economic output dropped almost 10% in real terms in Q2, which translates to an annualized loss of 32.9% for the quarter. The report says, and I quote, the decline in second quarter GDP reflected the response to COVID-19 as stay-at-home orders issued in March and April were partially lifted in some areas of the country in May and June, and government pandemic assistance payments were distributed to households and businesses. This led to rapid shifts in activity as businesses and schools continued remote work and consumers and businesses canceled, restricted, or redirected their spending, end quotes. The economic downturn reflects the real-life consequences of the lockdowns, not just a dip in the stock market as liberals would have you believe. People are losing their jobs, losing their homes and their livelihoods thanks to the government-mandated lockdowns. And by the way, none of this has stopped the virus. With me now, Senior Research Fellow at the American Institute for Economic Research, Phil Magness. Phil, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Phil, this is an incredible number. The economy contracted 32.9% in Q2. This is the most in history, not because of the virus, because of the lockdowns.
Right. It is an absolutely catastrophic economic collapse that we've witnessed. As you mentioned, 32.9% annualized decline in economic activity. On top of that, we have a new report out that's showing that jobless claims are skyrocketing again. 1.4 million claims were filed in the most recent period. So we're starting to see that uptick as other states are talking about reimposing lockdowns, putting more restrictions in place. But this is all self-inflicted.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're seeing in the state of California. We're seeing restaurants and bars being restricted to the point, or being closed altogether if they can't serve diners outdoors. It's terrible. So there are a couple of other COVID-related things that I want to talk about. It's really important to note, though, that the lockdowns clearly have not stopped the spread of COVID-19. We wouldn't be experiencing what we're experiencing if they worked. There's evidence that they don't work and that they're very damaging. Meanwhile, one of the therapeutic medications that has been studied and has been found to work in certain situations, and of course I'm talking about hydroxychloroquine. The state of Ohio has banned the use of hydroxychloroquine on COVID-19 patients, despite the fact that the Henry Ford Health System, Yale epidemiologists, and other places, not just in the United States, but around the world, have found this to be effective when combined with other therapeutics. I mean, at this point, it's hard to deny, or how do liberals deny, that the science has become political?
Right. That's entirely the case. They've politicized the science. They've put it in the hands of political decision makers and taken it away from doctors. Returning to the lockdown point, we have clear evidence of a connection between the economic contraction and the lockdowns. The latest numbers I've seen show that states that went into lockdown have, on average, about 5 percentage points higher unemployment than states that did not, or states that came out early. So even in questions like that, handing things over to the politicians has catastrophic real-world effects for everyday people, whether that's the science that's coming out of the hospitals or the economics that's coming out of the private sector. Both have been quashed under the heavy hand of government.
And meanwhile, Dr. Fauci suggests wearing goggles to protect your eyes against COVID-19.
So if you have goggles or an eye shield, you should use it. I mean, it's not universally recommended, but if you really want to be complete, you should probably use it if you can.
So if you want to protect yourself more fully, it's prudent to wear some kind of eye coverings.
If you have goggles, you should use it.
So I am officially Fauci compliant with all the things that he has told us to wear to go out into public. Oops, that didn't work. He's told us we all have to wear goggles in addition to masks now, and I figure snorkels are next, followed by a magic hat and then a cape.
Let people react themselves to that because of it's so absurd. It seems to me that these public health officials, though, their idea is they want to keep us all in glass lab jars until there's a vaccine that's been that's ready to be distributed. Here's the problem. According to a new CBS survey, 70%, 7 out of 10 Americans say they would wait to see what happens when others get the COVID vaccine once it's been created, if one is created effectively, or would never get one. How do you marry those two things?
Right, we're sitting holding out for a magic bullet that may never come, and yet here we have real world effects. Jobless claims are going up. People are facing inability to pay their mortgages, to pay their bills. Food insecurity is on the rise. And then on top of that, we have all the mental health effects and social effects of being under basically 4 months of heavy-handed lockdown and no end in sight. This is going to delay our economic decision making. It's going to delay all of our social interactions for months to come. But our political leaders are offering almost nothing in the way of a solution, just weird and increasingly ridiculous advice. It's just Fauci saying we should wear goggles now. I mean, what next? Capes, boots,
Oh my goodness.
magic
Can you even
hats?
imagine walking around saying, I have this picture of people wearing like a snorkel, like a swimming snorkel, so ridiculous.
Right.
But even this idea of trying to keep people locked down or trying to keep businesses restricted until a vaccine, regardless of people's individual choices about this, which people have every right to make that choice. This should never be something that's mandated. I'm not even sure liberals would be dumb enough to try that. However, we have no guarantee that a vaccine will be created that will be effective. For example, the H1N1 vaccine was dangerous and not effective. Even the flu vaccine, which has extremely wide and thorough distribution in the United States, according to the CDC, it only prevented 10% of deaths, flu deaths, in our country over the past 3 years. I don't understand how you can take that data, that scientific data, and then claim that a hypothetical vaccine about COVID-19 would behave differently than how all of our other vaccines behave.
No, I think that's absolutely the case. I mean, we're operating blind here still, even though we've been in this pandemic for we're coming up on 5 months now, and our scientific advisors are still just holding out kind of for like a pipe dream. Meanwhile, the real world consequences continue to add up. We know examples from other countries that took different approaches, such as Sweden. Sweden's economy is not dropping into the gutter right now. It's expected to have a very mild economic recession compared to this catastrophic losses that we have here. And yet, what's happening to their death numbers? They're on the decline.
Yeah.
What's happening to their case numbers? They're on the absolute decline. We picked the wrong strategy back in March and April, and we're still sticking to the wrong strategy with no end in sight because our political leaders are just buying into this sunk cost of the bad advice that they offered us to begin with.
Yeah, either that or they're too proud to admit that they were wrong because they'd have to then take responsibility for the economic devastation that not only people in the United States are experiencing, but the ripple effects of that are impacting people around the world. Phil, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.